There is a peculiar kind of silence that exists in the space between two people. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of intention. The silence that wraps itself around a room like smoke, filling every corner with something unspoken yet undeniable. It is the silence of those who have learned that words are not weapons but liabilities. That explanations are not bridges but confessions. That to speak is to reveal, and to reveal is to surrender the very thing that gives them power. You have felt this silence before. Perhaps in the presence of someone who looked at you without blinking, who answered your questions with questions, who moved through conflict like water around stone, never resisting, never yielding, simply flowing past your attempts to pin them down. You walked away from that encounter feeling somehow diminished, as if you had lost a game you did not know you were playing. And in the days that followed, you replayed the conversation in your mind, searching for the moment when the balance shifted, when you became the one explaining, justifying, defending, while they simply watched. This is not an accident. This is theater. And you, without knowing it, were cast in a role you never auditioned for. Before we continue, a warning. The knowledge that is about to be shared cannot be unlearned. It will permanently change the way you see human relationships. If you are ready to abandon comfortable illusions and see what is behind the stage, subscribe now. Because this is not just a video. It is the beginning of your journey under the mask. Now let us begin. The first thing you must understand is that power is not loud. Power does not announce itself. Power does not need to. The person who raises their voice has already lost control of the room. The person who must explain their authority has none. True power exists in the space where others fill the silence with their own anxieties, their own assumptions, their own desperate need to understand. And those who wield this power know something fundamental about human nature that most people spend their entire lives denying. We are not rational creatures. We are meaning-making machines, constantly spinning narratives to explain the world around us. And when we encounter someone who refuses to provide that narrative, our minds go into overdrive, filling the gaps with stories that often serve their purposes far better than any explanation they could have given. Imagine a woman named Elena. She works in an office where hierarchy is supposed to be clear, where titles and positions define who has power and who does not. Elena is not a manager. She does not sit in the corner office. She does not have direct reports or budget authority. Yet when Elena walks into a meeting, something shifts. People straighten in their chairs. Conversations pause mid-sentence. Eyes turn toward her, waiting. Not because she demands attention, but because she has trained them, through 1,000 small interactions, to give it. How did she do this? She never explained herself. Not once. Not ever. When someone questioned her decision on a project, she did not defend it. She simply looked at them, her expression neutral, and said nothing. The silence stretched. The questioner, uncomfortable, began to elaborate, to soften their challenge, to eventually talk themselves into agreeing with her original position. When a colleague tried to take credit for her idea in a meeting, she did not object. She did not correct the record. She simply smiled, a small, knowing smile that suggested she was aware of something they were not. The colleague felt that smile like a cold hand on the back of their neck. They stumbled through their presentation, suddenly uncertain, and by the end, everyone in the room sensed that something was off, that the story did not quite add up. Elena understood a truth that most people resist. When you explain yourself, you give others the tools to dismantle you. Every reason you provide is a thread they can pull. Every justification is a weakness they can exploit. But when you offer nothing, when you meet their demands for explanation with calm, impenetrable silence, they have nothing to work with except their own imagination. And the human imagination, when faced with uncertainty, tends toward the dramatic. They begin to assume you know something they do not, that you have resources they cannot see, that you are playing a game several moves ahead. And in assuming this, they make it true. This is the first principle of invisible power. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is the most powerful form of it. But silence alone is not enough. There is a second element, more subtle, more dangerous. It is the art of making others explain themselves to you, of reversing the flow of justification so completely that they do not even notice it happening. Consider a man named Marcus. He is in a relationship with a woman named Sophia. On the surface, their dynamic appears equal. They share decisions, they discuss their days, they navigate the ordinary conflicts of two lives intertwined. But beneath the surface, there is a current running in one direction. Sophia is always explaining where she went, why she is late, what she meant by that comment, who she was texting. Not because Marcus demands these explanations, but because he has created an environment where her failure to provide them feels like a transgression. How did he do this? Through the strategic deployment of disappointment. When Sophia came home 20 minutes late without calling, Marcus did not yell. He did not accuse. He simply looked sad, hurt. He said in a quiet voice that he had been worried, that he had imagined terrible things, that he just wanted to know she was safe. Sophia, feeling guilty for causing him pain, explained. She apologized. She promised to call next time. And in that moment, a precedent was set. Marcus had established that her movements required accounting, not through control, but through concern, not through anger, but through vulnerability. Over time, the pattern deepened. Sophia began to explain things before Marcus even asked. She would preemptively justify her choices, her friendships, her need for space. And Marcus would listen, his face a mask of understanding, occasionally asking a gentle question that made her explanation seem insufficient, that prompted her to dig deeper, to reveal more. He never told her what to do. He never forbade her from anything. He simply created a reality where her autonomy felt like a betrayal of his trust. This is the second principle of invisible power. Make them accountable to you without ever stating that they are. Let them build their own cage, bar by bar, explanation by explanation, until they cannot remember a time when they were free. But there is a darker layer still. Because the truly powerful do not just refuse to explain themselves and demand explanations from others. They make you doubt your own perception of reality. There is a term for this, borrowed from an old play, a story of a husband who dims the gaslights in their home and then convinces his wife she is imagining it. Gaslighting. But the word has been overused, diluted, turned into a catch-all for any form of disagreement. What we are talking about here is more precise. It is the deliberate cultivation of uncertainty in another person's mind about their own judgment, their own memory, their own sanity. Picture a scenario. You are in a conversation with someone, let us call them Alex. You clearly remember that Alex promised to help you with something important. You bring it up. Alex looks at you with genuine confusion. They have no memory of this promise. They are not defensive. They are concerned. They ask you if you are feeling all right. They suggest that maybe you are stressed, that maybe you are confusing them with someone else. Their tone is kind, worried even, and you, who were certain just moments ago, begin to waver. Did you imagine it? Did you misunderstand? Are you losing your grip? This is not an accident. This is a technique, and it works because it exploits a fundamental vulnerability in human cognition. We are not as certain of our memories as we think we are. Memory is not a recording. It is a reconstruction, built each time we recall it, susceptible to suggestion, to emotion, to the confidence of others. When someone we trust tells us our memory is wrong, especially when they do so with apparent sincerity, our brain begins to second-guess itself. And once that doubt is planted, it grows. Alex knows this. Alex has done this before. Not because Alex is evil, necessarily, but because Alex learned, somewhere along the way, that controlling the narrative of the past gives you control over the present. If you can make someone doubt what happened yesterday, you can make them doubt what is happening today. And if they doubt themselves, they will defer to you. They will look to you for the truth, and you become the author of their reality. This is the third principle of invisible power. Reality is not objective. It is negotiated. And the person who refuses to negotiate, who simply asserts their version with calm certainty, wins. Now, you might be thinking that these people, Elena and Marcus and Alex, are manipulators, narcissists, sociopaths, and perhaps some of them are. But here is the uncomfortable truth that we must confront. These techniques are not the exclusive domain of the disordered. They are tools, and tools are morally neutral. They can be used to harm, yes, but they can also be used to protect, to survive, to navigate a world that is often hostile to those who are too honest, too open, too willing to explain themselves. Think about the child who grows up in a home where every word is used against them, where honesty is punished and vulnerability is exploited. That child learns very quickly that silence is safety, that to reveal nothing is to give nothing away. They learn to watch, to listen, to let others fill the silence with their own assumptions. They learn that the less they explain, the less ammunition they provide. And when they grow up, they carry these lessons into their adult relationships, into their workplaces, into every interaction. Are they manipulative? Or are they simply armored? Consider the woman who works in a male-dominated field, who is watched again and again as her ideas are dismissed when she presents them with enthusiasm, but adopted when she presents them with detached certainty, who has learned that explaining her reasoning invites challenge, but stating her conclusions invites compliance, who has discovered that men in her office do not explain themselves, they simply decide, and that when she does the same, she is finally taken seriously. Is she playing games? Or is she playing by the rules she did not write, but must follow to survive? Think about the person who has been gaslit themselves, who has had their reality questioned so many times that they no longer trust their own perceptions, who has learned that the only way to protect themselves is to become unmovable, to assert their truth with such unwavering confidence that others cannot shake it, who has discovered that if they show even a flicker of doubt, it will be exploited. Are they gaslighting others? Or are they simply refusing to be gaslit again? This is where the mask becomes complicated, because we wear it not just to deceive, but to defend. Not just to manipulate, but to survive. And the line between protection and predation is thinner than we want to believe. There is a story, old as civilization itself, about a king who wanted to know the secret of power. He summoned the wisest advisors in his kingdom and asked them to distill all their knowledge into a single sentence. They debated for months. Finally, they returned with their answer. The secret of power, they said, is this: he who cares least wins. The king was disappointed. He had expected something more profound, something about strategy or strength or divine right. But the advisors insisted. In any negotiation, any conflict, any relationship, the person who is willing to walk away, who needs the outcome less, who can endure the discomfort of uncertainty longer, holds all the cards. The person who must have resolution, who cannot bear the tension, who needs to know, to understand, to fix, will always capitulate to the one who can simply wait. This is the fourth principle of invisible power. Detachment is dominance. But detachment is not the same as not caring. This is crucial. The truly powerful care deeply. They care about outcomes, about goals, about winning. What they do not care about is being liked, being understood, being seen as good. They have made a calculation, conscious or unconscious, that these things, these social rewards that most people crave, are less valuable than the thing they actually want. And in making that calculation, they free themselves from the primary lever of social control. Most people are governed by the need for approval. We're social animals. Our brains are wired to seek acceptance, to avoid rejection, to maintain our standing in the group. This is not weakness. This is survival. For most of human history, being cast out of the group meant death. So we evolved to be exquisitely sensitive to social feedback. We adjust our behavior, our opinions, our very sense of self to fit what we perceive others want from us. And this deep-seated need is the vulnerability that those with invisible power exploit. They do not need your approval. Or rather, they have trained themselves not to need it. They have found other sources of validation, internal or external, that insulate them from the social consequences that control everyone else. And because they do not need you to like them, they can do things that others cannot. They can say no without softening it. They can make decisions that benefit them at your expense without losing sleep. They can watch you suffer the consequences of their choices without rushing to fix it, to apologize, to make it right. This sounds monstrous, and sometimes it is, but sometimes it is simply necessary. There is a woman named Diane. She is a mother of 3. For years, she was the peacekeeper in her family. When her children fought, she mediated. When her husband was stressed, she absorbed it. When her own mother criticized her parenting, she defended herself, explained herself, tried to make her mother understand. She was exhausted. She was resentful. She was invisible, her own needs always secondary to the emotional management of everyone around her. Then something shifted. Maybe it was a book she read. Maybe it was a conversation with a friend. Maybe it was simply reaching a breaking point. But Diane decided to stop explaining herself. When her teenage daughter demanded to know why she could not go to a party, Diane said, "Because I said no." When her daughter pushed, demanded reasons, accused her of being unfair, Diane simply repeated, "I have made my decision." She did not argue. She did not justify. She sat with her daughter's anger, her tears, her accusations of being the worst mother ever, and she did not flinch. It was excruciating. Every instinct screamed at her to explain, to make her daughter understand, to repair the relationship. But she held firm, and after an hour of rage, her daughter went to her room. And the next day, she did not bring it up. And the next time Diane said no, her daughter tested her, but less. And the time after that, even less. Because her daughter learned that Diane's no meant no. That there was no negotiation. No amount of emotional escalation would change the outcome. And in learning this, her daughter actually relaxed. Because children, despite what they say, do not want parents they can manipulate. They want parents who are solid, unmovable, safe. Diane did not stop caring about her daughter. She cared more than ever. But she stopped caring about being liked in the moment. She stopped needing her daughter's approval of her decisions. And in doing so, she became a better parent. This is the paradox of invisible power. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to explain yourself. Sometimes, caring about someone means caring less about their immediate emotional reaction to your boundaries. But here is where it gets dangerous. Because once you learn this, once you feel the relief and the strength of not needing approval, it is intoxicating. It is easy to go too far. To confuse healthy boundaries with emotional unavailability. To mistake detachment for cruelty. To use the tools of self-protection as weapons of control. There is a man named Robert. He learned, through painful experience, that showing vulnerability in his workplace was professional suicide. Every time he admitted he did not know something, it was used against him. Every time he asked for help, he was seen as weak. So he stopped. He cultivated an image of absolute competence. He never admitted mistakes. He never asked questions. When he did not know something, he researched it privately or delegated it in a way that made it seem like a strategic choice rather than a gap in his knowledge. This worked. He was promoted. He was respected. He was feared in a way that felt like power. But then he brought this persona home. When his partner asked him about his feelings, he deflected. When she wanted to discuss problems in their relationship, he treated it like a negotiation, a problem to be managed rather than a connection to be nurtured. When she said she felt distant from him, he did not soften. He did not explain. He simply said that he was who he was, and she needed to accept it. His partner left. And Robert, alone in his apartment, surrounded by the trappings of his professional success, realized that he had won the game at work and lost the game that mattered. He had become so good at not explaining himself, at maintaining detachment, at refusing to need approval, that he had forgotten how to be known. And without being known, he could not be loved. This is the shadow side of the mask. It protects you, but it also isolates you. And if you wear it long enough, you forget that it is a mask at all. You begin to believe that the persona is the person, that the armor is the skin. And when someone asks you to remove it, you realize you do not know how. Or worse, you realize there is nothing underneath. In the study of human behavior, there is a concept called the dark triad. 3 personality traits that, when combined, create a particular kind of person. Narcissism, the belief in one's own superiority and entitlement to special treatment. Machiavellianism, the willingness to manipulate and deceive to achieve one's goals. Psychopathy, the lack of empathy and remorse. These traits exist on a spectrum. We all have elements of them. But in some people, they are pronounced enough to define how they move through the world. And here is the thing about people high in dark triad traits. They are often successful. They rise to positions of power. They accumulate wealth. They attract followers. Not despite their lack of empathy, but because of it. Because empathy, while beautiful, is also a constraint. It makes you hesitate. It makes you consider the impact of your actions on others. It makes you feel bad when you hurt someone, even if hurting them serves your goals. And in a competitive environment, that hesitation is a disadvantage. The person who does not feel that hesitation moves faster, decides quicker, takes opportunities that others, bound by conscience, would pass up. And they do it all without the weight of guilt. But here is what is interesting. You do not need to be high in dark triad traits to use these techniques. You do not need to lack empathy to refuse to explain yourself. You do not need to be a narcissist to cultivate detachment. You do not need to be Machiavellian to make others accountable to you. These are skills, and skills can be learned. The question is not whether you can learn them. The question is whether you should. There is a thought experiment in philosophy called the Ring of Gyges. It comes from Plato. The story goes that a shepherd finds a ring that makes him invisible. With this power, he seduces the queen, kills the king, and takes the throne. The question Plato poses is this: if you could act without consequences, without anyone knowing, would you still be good? Or is morality only a function of being watched? The techniques we are discussing are a kind of invisibility, not literal but social. When you refuse to explain yourself, you become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to hold accountable. You operate in the shadows of social interaction, where the normal rules do not quite apply. And in that space, you have a choice. You can use this invisibility to protect yourself, to set boundaries, to navigate a world that would otherwise exploit you. Or you can use it to exploit others. The ring does not make you evil, but it reveals what you already are. Consider two people, both skilled in the art of invisible power. The first is a woman named Carla. She grew up in poverty, in a neighborhood where showing weakness meant becoming a target. She learned early to keep her cards close, to never let anyone see her sweat, to respond to threats not with fear, but with a cold, calculating stare that made people think twice. She used these skills to get out, to get an education, to build a business, to create opportunities for others from her community. She does not explain herself because she learned that explanations are seen as excuses, and excuses are seen as weakness. But she uses her power to lift others up, to create systems that are fair, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. The second is a man named Victor. He also grew up in difficult circumstances. He also learned that vulnerability is dangerous. But Victor learned something else. He learned that people are easy to manipulate, that if you say the right things, make the right promises, show the right amount of charm, you can get them to do almost anything. He used these skills to climb, to take credit for others' work, to build alliances that he would later betray when it served him, to accumulate power not to create anything, but simply to have it. He does not explain himself because he knows that explanations create accountability, and accountability limits his options. Same skills, different intentions, different outcomes. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know if the person who refuses to explain themselves is a Carla or a Victor? How do you know if you, in learning these techniques, are protecting yourself or becoming someone you would not recognize? Here is a test. Ask yourself, what do I do with the power I gain? Do I use it to create space for myself and others to thrive? Or do I use it to diminish others so I can feel bigger? Do I set boundaries because I need them, or because I enjoy watching people struggle against them? Do I refuse to explain myself because the explanation is genuinely no one's business, or because I am hiding something I know is wrong? The answer to these questions is not always clear. We are skilled at lying to ourselves, at justifying our actions, at believing that our cruelty is actually kindness, our manipulation is actually strategy, our selfishness is actually self-care. But there is a feeling deep in the body that knows the truth. It is the feeling you get when you have done something that serves you but harms another, and you tell yourself it was necessary. There is a tightness in the chest, a quickness to defend, a need to avoid thinking about it too deeply. That feeling is your conscience trying to get your attention. And the more you ignore it, the quieter it becomes, until one day you realize you cannot hear it at all. This is how good people become bad people. Not all at once. Not with a dramatic choice between good and evil. But slowly, incrementally, through 1,000 small decisions to prioritize power over connection, control over compassion, winning over being known. There is a scene that plays out in offices, in homes, in relationships everywhere, every day. Someone has made a mistake. Not a catastrophic one, but significant enough that it needs to be addressed. In a healthy dynamic, the person who made the mistake acknowledges it, explains what happened, and works to fix it. But in a dynamic governed by invisible power, something different happens. The person who made the mistake does not acknowledge it. When confronted, they do not deny it outright. That would be too obvious. Instead, they reframe it. They suggest that what looks like a mistake is actually a misunderstanding, that the person bringing it up is being too sensitive, too rigid, too focused on the wrong things. They shift the conversation from the mistake itself to the character of the person pointing it out. And if that does not work, they simply wait. They let the conversation die in the silence. They know that most people, uncomfortable with conflict, will eventually let it go. This is called DARVO. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. It is a pattern seen in abusers, in politicians, in anyone who has learned that the best defense is a good offense. But it is also, in milder forms, a pattern seen in ordinary people who have learned that accountability is uncomfortable and can often be avoided. Why does it work? Because it exploits our desire for social harmony. Most people do not want to be the person who keeps bringing up the problem, who will not let it go, who insists on accountability when everyone else just wants to move on. There is a social cost to being that person. You are seen as difficult, unforgiving, a troublemaker. And so, even when you know you are right, even when you know the other person is deflecting, you often choose peace over justice. You let it go, and the person who made the mistake learns that they can do it again. There is a relationship, Let us call them Sam and Jordan. Sam has a pattern of making promises and not keeping them. Small things mostly. I will call you back. I will be there at 7. I will take care of that thing you asked about. And then consistently, Sam does not follow through. When Jordan brings it up, Sam apologizes. But the apology is vague. I am sorry you feel that way. I am sorry if I let you down. Never. I am sorry I did not call you back. I will do better. The apology is designed to end the conversation, not to change the behavior. Jordan, wanting to believe in Sam, accepts the apology. But it happens again, and eventually Jordan stops bringing it up. Not because the problem is solved, but because the cost of bringing it up, the emotional labor of the conversation, the guilt of making Sam feel bad, is higher than the cost of just lowering expectations. This is how invisible power erodes relationships. Not through dramatic betrayals, but through 1,000 small failures that are never quite acknowledged, never quite repaired. The person with power, the person who refuses to be accountable, trains the other person to stop expecting accountability. And once expectations are lowered, the relationship becomes fundamentally unequal. One person is held to standards, the other is not. But here is the twist. Sometimes the person doing this does not even realize they are doing it. They are not consciously manipulating. They are simply conflict avoidant. They have learned, through their own history, that admitting fault leads to punishment, to shame, to rejection. So they have developed reflexive defenses. Deflection, minimization, vague apologies. These are not strategies. They are survival mechanisms. And they are destroying their relationships just as surely as if they were intentional. This is the tragedy of the mask. Sometimes the person wearing it is as trapped by it as the people around them. There is a concept in psychology called the false self. It was developed by a psychoanalyst named Donald Winnicott. The idea is that children, in order to survive in environments that are not attuned to their needs, develop a persona that is acceptable to their caregivers. They learn to hide their true feelings, their true needs, their true selves, and present instead a version that will be loved, or at least not rejected. This false self is adaptive in childhood. It protects the child. But if it is not eventually integrated, if the person never learns to bring their true self forward, they spend their entire life performing. And the performance becomes so habitual that they forget it is a performance at all. The techniques of invisible power, the refusal to explain, the cultivation of detachment, the strategic use of silence, these can all be expressions of the false self. A way of moving through the world that keeps people at a distance, that prevents true intimacy, that protects the fragile true self that was never allowed to develop. And here is the cruelest part. The false self is often very successful. It is charming, competent, unflappable. It rises in careers. It attracts partners. It accumulates all the external markers of a life well lived. But inside there is an emptiness, a sense of being a fraud, of waiting to be found out, of never being truly seen. This is the cost of the mask. You get power, you get control, you get safety, but you lose connection. You lose intimacy. You lose the possibility of being loved for who you actually are, because no one, including you, knows who that is anymore. Let us talk about charisma, because charisma is often confused with warmth, with likability, with being the person everyone wants to be around. But true charisma is something different. It is the ability to make people feel something in your presence, and that something does not have to be positive. There are people who walk into a room and the energy shifts. Not because they are friendly, but because they are magnetic. They have a quality of presence, of intensity, that draws attention. And often that quality comes not from openness, but from containment. From the sense that there is something powerful happening beneath the surface that they are choosing not to reveal. This is the charisma of the masked. They do not overshare. They do not perform enthusiasm. They do not try to make you like them. And paradoxically, this makes you want their approval more. Because we are wired to pursue that which retreats from us, to value that which is scarce. And attention, approval, access to the inner world of someone who rarely grants it, these are scarce resources. There is a leader, let us call her Nina. She runs a company. She is not warm. She does not do the birthday cakes and the team-building exercises and the casual Friday small talk. She is polite, professional, and distant. When she speaks in meetings, she is brief. She asks questions more than she makes statements. And when she does make a decision, she does not explain her reasoning. She simply announces it and moves on. Her employees are obsessed with her. They analyze her every word. They try to figure out what she is thinking. They compete for her rare praise. They fear her disapproval more than they fear being fired. Because Nina has created an environment where her internal state is a mystery, and solving that mystery feels like the key to success. Is Nina manipulating them? Maybe. Or maybe Nina is just introverted, just private, just someone who does not see the value in performing emotional availability for people she pays to do a job. The effect is the same either way. She has power. And she has it because she has made herself unknowable. But there is a cost to this too. Nina's employees do not trust her. They respect her, they fear her, they are fascinated by her. But they do not trust her. Because trust requires vulnerability. It requires knowing that the other person will consider your needs, your perspective, your humanity. And Nina, in her containment, in her refusal to explain or reveal, has made it clear that she does not operate on that level. She is playing a different game. And so her company is efficient, but it is not loyal. People leave as soon as they get a better offer. They do not go the extra mile unless they are being watched. They do not bring her problems until those problems are too big to hide. Because they know that Nina does not care about them. She cares about outcomes, and they are just variables in her equation. This is the fifth principle of invisible power. You can have control, or you can have trust. Rarely both. Now, some people are fine with this trade-off. They would rather have control. They sleep better at night knowing that they are not dependent on anyone's goodwill, that they have structured their life in a way that does not require trust. But most people, if they are honest, want both. They want the power that comes from being unreadable, and they want the connection that comes from being known. And you cannot have both. Not fully, because to be known is to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable is to give others power over you. This is the central tension of human existence. We are social creatures who need connection to survive. But connection requires vulnerability, and vulnerability is dangerous. So we develop strategies to get the benefits of connection without the risks of vulnerability. We perform intimacy without actually being intimate. We share, but only the parts of ourselves that are acceptable. We let people in, but only so far. And some people get very, very good at this performance. So good that they fool even themselves. There is a man named Ethan. He is everyone's best friend. He is the person you call when you need to talk. He listens. He empathizes. He remembers details about your life. He makes you feel seen. But if you pay attention, you will notice something. Ethan never needs you. He never calls you with a problem. He never asks for advice. He never reveals anything that makes him look weak or uncertain or human. The relationship is one way. You pour into him, and he receives, and he gives back warmth and validation, but never vulnerability. Ethan has mastered the art of pseudo-intimacy. He gets all the benefits of close relationships, the social capital, the network, the sense of being loved, without ever actually risking himself. And because he is so good at making others feel heard, they do not notice that they have never heard him. Not really. Is Ethan a bad person? Not necessarily. Maybe Ethan grew up in a family where his needs were ignored, where vulnerability was punished, where he learned that the only way to be valued was to be useful. So he became the helper, the listener, the rock, and he gets genuine satisfaction from that role. But he is also lonely, deeply, profoundly lonely, because no one knows him, and he has structured his entire life to ensure that no one ever will. This is another cost of the mask. You can be surrounded by people and still be utterly alone. Let us go deeper, into the place where power and identity merge. Because the masks we wear are not just tools. They become who we are. And the question of whether we are manipulating others or protecting ourselves becomes impossible to answer, because the distinction has dissolved. There is a theory in sociology called dramaturgy, developed by Erving Goffman. The idea is that all social interaction is performance. We have a front stage, where we present a curated version of ourselves to the world, and a backstage, where we drop the act and are our real selves. But Goffman suggests that maybe there is no real self. Maybe it is all performance, all the way down. Maybe the person you are when you are alone is just another performance, this time for an audience of one. If this is true, then the question of authenticity becomes meaningless. There is no authentic self to be true to. There is only the self you construct, moment by moment, interaction by interaction. And the person who is most skilled at constructing a self that gets them what they want is not a manipulator. They are simply a better actor. But this feels wrong, does it not? It feels like there is something inside us that is real, that is not performance, that is the core of who we are. And maybe there is. Maybe it is the feeling you get when you do something that violates your values. The tightness in the chest. The voice that says, "This is not who I want to be." Maybe that voice is the real self. And maybe the mask is anything that silences it. If that is true, then the danger of invisible power is not that it makes you a bad person. It is that it makes you a stranger to yourself. There is a woman named Lillian. She has spent her entire career in politics. She has learned to say what people want to hear, to make promises she knows she cannot keep, to smile at people she despises, to betray allies when it serves her advancement. She tells herself that this is just how the game is played, that everyone does it, that her intentions are good, even if her methods are questionable, that once she has enough power, she will use it to do good things. But the power never feels like enough. There is always one more election, one more compromise, one more betrayal that is justified by the greater good she will achieve later. And slowly, imperceptibly, Lillian becomes someone she would have hated when she was young. She does not notice the transformation because it happens 1 degree at a time. But the people who knew her before, they notice. They see the hardness in her eyes, the calculation in every word, the absence of anything spontaneous or genuine. Lillian has become the mask. And the person she was before, the idealistic young woman who went into politics to change the world, is gone. Not hidden. Gone. Eroded away by 1,000 small choices to prioritize power over principle. This is the ultimate cost. You can lose yourself. And the tragedy is that you often do not realize it until it is too late. Until you are sitting alone, surrounded by everything you thought you wanted, and you feel nothing. Because the person who wanted those things does not exist anymore. But it does not have to be this way. There is another path. A harder path, but one that leads somewhere worth going. It starts with a simple question. Who do I want to be? Not who do I want people to think I am. Not what do I want to achieve. But who, at the core, do I want to be? What values do I want to live by? What kind of relationships do I want to have? What do I want to feel when I look at myself in the mirror? And then the harder question, is the person I am right now aligned with that? Are the masks I wear, the techniques I use, the power I accumulate, are they serving that vision? Or are they taking me further from it? This requires brutal honesty. It requires sitting with the uncomfortable truth that maybe, in your quest for safety or success or control, you have become someone you do not like. That maybe the people you have hurt were not just collateral damage. That maybe the explanations you have refused to give were not boundaries but evasions. That maybe the power you have accumulated has made you smaller, not larger. But here is the thing about honesty. It is also liberation. Because once you see clearly, you can choose differently. You can decide that the mask is not serving you anymore. That the cost is too high. That you would rather be vulnerable and connected than powerful and alone. This does not mean becoming a doormat. It does not mean explaining yourself to people who have not earned an explanation. It does not mean abandoning boundaries or accepting mistreatment. It means being intentional. It means using the tools of power when they serve your values and putting them down when they do not. It means knowing the difference between protecting yourself and harming others. And it means being willing to live with the consequences of being known. Because here is the secret that the masked never learn. Being known is terrifying, but it is also the only way to be loved. Not admired, not feared, not needed, loved. And love, real love, is the only thing that fills the emptiness that power creates. There is a moment that comes in every relationship where the mask must come off, where the performance must end, where you must decide whether to let the other person see you, truly see you, or to walk away. This moment is terrifying because it is the moment where you lose control. You cannot manage their reaction. You cannot predict the outcome. You can only offer yourself as you are and wait. Most people run from this moment. They end the relationship before it gets there. They sabotage it. They pick fights. They cheat. They disappear. Anything to avoid the vulnerability of being seen. Because being seen means being judged. And what if they look at you, at the real you, and decide you are not enough? But some people stay. They take the risk. They remove the mask. And sometimes, yes, the other person rejects them. And it hurts. It hurts in a way that confirms every fear they ever had about vulnerability. But sometimes the other person stays too. They see you, all of you, the parts you are proud of and the parts you are ashamed of, and they choose you anyway. And that is worth more than all the power in the world. There is a couple, let us call them Maya and Chris. They have been together for 3 years. On the surface, their relationship is perfect. They never fight. They're always supportive. They finish each other's sentences. But beneath the surface, Both of them are performing. Maya hides her anxiety, her need for reassurance, her fear that she is not interesting enough to keep Chris's attention. Chris hides his depression, his financial stress, his fear that he is not successful enough to be worthy of Maya. They are both so busy managing their image that they are not actually connecting. Then one night, after a particularly hard day, Maya breaks. She does not mean to. She has been holding it together, smiling through the anxiety, but something Chris says, something innocuous, just cracks her open. And she starts crying. Not pretty crying. Ugly, snotty, gasping crying. And she tells him everything. How scared she is all the time. How she feels like she is pretending to be someone she is not. How she is terrified that if he really knew her, he would leave. Chris is stunned. He has never seen her like this. And for a moment, Maya is sure she has ruined everything. But then Chris starts crying too. And he tells her about the depression, about the debt, about the nights he lies awake feeling like a failure, about how he has been pretending to have it all together because he thought that was what she needed. And in that moment, the masks come off. And what is underneath is messy and broken and scared. But it is real. And for the first time in 3 years, they actually see each other. And they realize that the person they have been performing for does not exist. They have both been in love with a fantasy. But maybe they can fall in love with the reality. This is the possibility that the mask obscures. That you might be loved not despite your flaws, but with them. That vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. That the very things you are hiding might be the things that create real connection. But this requires a leap of faith. It requires believing that you are worth loving as you are. And if you have spent your whole life being told, explicitly or implicitly, that you are not, that belief is hard to come by. So where does this leave us? We have talked about the techniques of invisible power, the refusal to explain, the cultivation of detachment, the strategic use of silence, the reversal of accountability. We have talked about how these techniques can protect you and how they can destroy you, how they can be tools of survival or weapons of manipulation, how they can make you powerful and make you alone. But we have not answered the central question. Should you use them? And the answer, unsatisfying as it is it depends. It depends on who you are, on what you have survived, on what you are trying to build, on whether you are using these tools to create space for yourself to exist or to take space from others, on whether you are protecting your boundaries or avoiding intimacy, on whether you are refusing to explain yourself because the explanation is no one's business, or because you know your actions cannot be justified. There is no universal rule. There is only the specific, messy, complicated reality of your life. And the question you have to ask yourself again and again is this serving me? Is this serving the person I want to be? Is this creating the life I want to live? And if the answer is no, then you have to be willing to change. To put down the mask, even if it feels like putting down your armor. To risk being seen, even if it means being hurt. To choose connection over control, even though control feels safer. This is not easy. It might be the hardest thing you ever do. Because the mask is not just a tool. It is a habit, a reflex, an identity. And letting it go feels like dying. In a way, it is. It is the death of the false self. The death of the persona you built to survive. And you do not know if there is anything underneath. You do not know if the real you is strong enough to make it without the armor. But here is what I can tell you. The real you is stronger than you think. The real you has survived everything that made you build the mask in the first place. The real you is not weak. The real you is just scared. And that is okay. Fear is not the enemy. Pretending you are not afraid is. So maybe the first step is not to remove the mask entirely. Maybe it is just to acknowledge that you are wearing one. To notice the moments when you deflect, when you go silent, when you make others explain themselves while you remain opaque. To ask yourself, in those moments, what you are protecting, and whether it still needs protecting. Maybe the second step is to experiment. To try in small, safe ways to be more transparent. To explain yourself when you do not have to. To admit when you do not know. To apologize when you are wrong, not with a vague, I am sorry you feel that way, but with a real, specific, accountable apology. To see what happens. To notice if the world ends. Spoiler, it will not. And maybe slowly, you will find that you need the mask less. That you can be powerful and vulnerable. That you can set boundaries and be open. That you can protect yourself without hiding yourself. That you can be seen and still be safe. Or maybe you will find that the mask is necessary. That the world you live in, the people you are surrounded by, are not safe enough for you to remove it. And that is okay too. Survival is not a moral failing. Protecting yourself is not a sin. You do what you need to do to make it through. But even then, even if you must wear the mask in the world, try to take it off when you are alone. Try to remember who you are underneath. Try to keep that person alive, even if no one else gets to see them. Because you deserve to know yourself. You deserve to be more than a performance. Let us return to where we started. To the silence between two people. To the moment when one refuses to explain and the other scrambles to fill the void. We understand now that this is not just a tactic. It is a symptom of a world that punishes vulnerability and rewards control. A symptom of childhoods where honesty was dangerous and performance was survival. A symptom of a culture that tells us we are only as valuable as we are useful, as we are strong, as we are invulnerable. And we understand now that the person who wields invisible power is not a villain. They are a survivor. They learned to play the game because not playing meant losing everything. They learned to hide because being seen meant being hurt. They learned to control because chaos was terrifying. But we also understand that survival strategies, while necessary in the moment, can become prisons. That the walls you build to keep danger out also keep connection out. That the mask you wear to protect yourself can become the thing that suffocates you. So what do we do with this knowledge? How do we move forward, knowing what we know? We start by having compassion. For ourselves, for the masks we have worn, for the ways we have hurt others in our attempts to protect ourselves. We acknowledge that we did the best we could with the tools we had, and we forgive ourselves for the times when our best was not good enough. And then we have compassion for others, for the people in our lives who refuse to explain themselves, who remain opaque, who wield power in ways that hurt us. We recognize that they too are survivors, that their masks are armor, that beneath the armor is a person who is scared and lonely and doing the best they can. This does not mean accepting mistreatment. Compassion is not the same as tolerance for harm. You can understand why someone is the way they are and still choose not to have them in your life. You can have empathy for their pain and still protect yourself from their behavior. Boundaries and compassion are not opposites. They are partners. But it does mean approaching these dynamics with curiosity rather than judgment. With a recognition that human behavior is complex, that people are rarely purely good or purely bad, that we are all just trying to navigate a world that is often hostile and confusing and unfair. And maybe in that curiosity, we find a way forward, a way to use the tools of power when we need them, and to put them down when we do not, a way to protect ourselves without becoming cruel, a way to be strategic without losing our humanity, a way to wear the mask when necessary and to remove it when safe. This is the art of living consciously, of being intentional about who you are and how you move through the world, of recognizing that you have choices, even when it does not feel like it, of understanding that the person you are today is not the person you have to be tomorrow. Because here is the truth that the mask obscures. You are not fixed. You are not doomed to repeat the patterns of your past. You are not trapped in the persona you have built. You can change. It will be hard. It will be uncomfortable. It will require you to face parts of yourself you have been avoiding. But you can change. And the first step is simply to see the mask, to see the ways you have been performing, to see the cost of that performance, and to decide consciously whether it is worth it. Maybe it is. Maybe for now the mask is necessary. Maybe you are not ready to take it off. Maybe the world is not safe enough. And that is okay. But at least you know. At least you are choosing rather than just reacting. At least you are aware. And awareness, even without change, is powerful. Because once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Once you understand the game, you cannot pretend you do not know the rules. And that knowledge, uncomfortable as it is the beginning of freedom. There is one more thing we need to talk about. The people on the other side of the mask. The ones who are in relationships with those who refuse to explain themselves. The ones who are constantly trying to understand, to decode, to make sense of someone who will not let themselves be known. Because this dynamic does not just affect the person wearing the mask. It affects everyone around them. If you are in a relationship with someone who wields invisible power, you know the feeling. The constant uncertainty. The sense that you are always one step behind. The exhaustion of trying to read someone who will not be read. The loneliness of being with someone who is not really there. And you have probably asked yourself many times whether you are the problem. Whether you are too needy, too sensitive, too demanding. Because that is what they have told you, implicitly or explicitly. That your need for clarity, for explanation, for emotional presence is unreasonable. That you should be able to accept them as they are. That if you really love them, you would not need so much. But here is what you need to know. Your needs are not unreasonable. Wanting to understand your partner is not needy. Expecting accountability is not demanding. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for the basic components of a healthy relationship. And if those components are not available, it is not because you are flawed. It is because the relationship is. This is hard to accept. Because if you accept it, you have to make a choice. You have to decide whether you can live with the relationship as it is, knowing that it will not change, or whether you need to leave. And leaving feels impossible. Because you love them. Because you have invested so much. Because you keep hoping that if you just try harder, if you just figure out the right way to reach them, they will finally let you in. But they will not. Not because you are not enough, but because they cannot. The mask is not something they are doing to you. It is something they are doing to survive. And until they decide for themselves that they want to take it off, nothing you do will change it. So what do? You focus on yourself. You stop trying to manage their emotions, to decode their silences, to earn their explanations. You set boundaries. You say, I need clarity in this relationship. I need to know where I stand. I need you to be accountable when you hurt me. And if you cannot give me those things, I need to reconsider whether this relationship is healthy for me. And then you follow through. Not as a threat, not as a manipulation, but as a genuine boundary. You decide what you are willing to accept, and you stick to it. Even if it means losing the relationship. Because staying in a relationship that requires you to shrink, to doubt yourself, to constantly accommodate someone who will not accommodate you is not love. It is self-abandonment. And you deserve better. You deserve to be with someone who wants to be known, who values your need for connection, who sees vulnerability not as weakness but as intimacy, who explains themselves not because you demand it, but because they want you to understand them. That person exists. But you will not find them if you are pouring all your energy into someone who cannot or will not meet you halfway. This is not about blame. The person wearing the mask is not a bad person. They are a hurt person. But hurt people, and you cannot heal them. You can only decide whether you are willing to be hurt in the process of them not healing themselves. So choose yourself. Choose your peace. Choose relationships that feel like relief, not like work. Choose people who make you feel more like yourself, not less. Choose to believe that you are worth being chosen back. And if you are the person wearing the mask and you are reading this, and you recognize yourself, know this. The people in your life who are asking you to explain yourself, to be vulnerable, to let them in, they are not trying to control you. They're trying to love you. And you can let them. You can take the risk. You can remove the mask just a little, just enough to let the light in. And you might find that the thing you have been protecting yourself from, being known, is actually the thing you have been longing for all along. But you have to choose it. No one can choose it for you. We are near the end now. And I want to leave you with a story. A story about a man who wore a mask for so long that he forgot it was there. His name was Thomas. He was successful by every external measure. He had built a company from nothing. He had wealth, status, respect. He was known as a brilliant strategist, someone who could see 10 moves ahead, who never showed his hand, who always won. People feared him. People admired him. But no one knew him. Thomas had learned early that showing emotion was a liability. His father had been a volatile man, quick to anger, quicker to punish. Thomas learned to be still, to reveal nothing, to wait out the storms. And this skill, this ability to remain calm and opaque in the face of chaos, served him well in business. He could negotiate without flinching. He could fire people without guilt. He could make decisions that others found impossible because he did not let emotion cloud his judgment. But Thomas was alone. He had been married once, briefly. His wife had left him, saying that living with him was like living with a ghost. He had friends, or at least people he did business with, people he played golf with, people who would take his call. But he had no one he could talk to. No one who knew what he thought about when he could not sleep. No one who had seen him cry. And then Thomas got sick. Not seriously at first. Just a persistent cough that would not go away. But tests led to more tests, and eventually a diagnosis. Cancer. Treatable, the doctors said, but serious. He would need surgery, chemotherapy, months of recovery. For the first time in his life, Thomas could not control the outcome. He could not strategize his way out of this. He could not remain detached. He was scared, and he had no one to tell. He went through the surgery alone. He told his assistant he was taking a sabbatical. He told his board he was working remotely. He told no one the truth. And in the hospital, after the surgery, When he woke up in pain and fear, there was no one there. Just nurses who were kind but busy, who saw him as a patient, not a person. And in that moment, Thomas realized what he had done. He had spent his entire life building walls, and now, when he needed someone on the other side of them, there was no one. He had won every game, accumulated every marker of success, and he was going to die alone. He did not die. The treatment worked. He recovered. But something in him had broken, or maybe something had finally cracked open. He started therapy. He started slowly, painfully, to talk about his childhood, about his father, about the fear that had governed his entire life, about the mask he had worn for so long that he had forgotten what his own face looked like. And he started to change. He reached out to his ex-wife, not to get back together, but to apologize, to acknowledge the ways he had hurt her, to explain, finally, why he had been the way he was. She was surprised, wary, but she listened. And in that conversation, Thomas felt something he had not felt in decades. Relief. The relief of being seen. He started being honest with his friends. Real honest, not the performative honesty of business networking. He told them he had been sick. He told them he had been scared. He told them he was trying to be different. Some of them did not know how to handle it. They drifted away. But a few stayed. And with those few, he built something real. Thomas is still successful. He still runs his company. He is still strategic. But he is no longer alone. He has learned that vulnerability is not weakness. That explaining yourself is not surrender. That the mask, while protective, is also a prison. And he has chosen every day to take it off. This is not a fairy tale. Thomas still struggles. There are days when the old patterns resurface, when he retreats into silence, when he feels the pull of the mask. But he is aware now, and awareness gives him a choice. And he chooses, more often than not, to be present, to be known, to be human. And that, more than any business success, more than any accumulation of power, is the thing he is most proud of.